Hey friends, welcome back to week 5 of Rotoworld's DFS building blocks. Almost on time, but that's okay, we're here now. I am John Daigle and joined as always by Ian Hartitz. Ian, cliche opening podcast line, how's it going?
Going good, John. I think you nailed that cliche opening podcast.
Say, yeah, whatever it is.
Whatever, man.
Either way, we are back for week 5. And I actually want to start us here with the Thursday night game, not only because it's an interesting one, a divisional bout between the Seahawks and Rams, but because we promised we'd talk about it last week with the people, and we just completely forgot.
Drop the ball.
Drop the ball on that one.
It's okay.
But let's open this up with talk on this showdown slate.
Back-to-back Thursday, solid. We'll see, but it's looking like back-to-back solid Thursday night games.
Yes.
Enjoyed Packers and the Eagles last week. But yeah, no, good spot here. It's a divisional rivalry. We got the Rams and Seahawks, and a lot of capable offensive talents on both sides of the ball. I'm most interested in the Seahawks passing game because we've seen Tyler Lockett, even though last week I think went 451-0, wasn't huge, but he's been getting the targets in games that they haven't just immediately seized a big lead in, which is great. He should be. He's so talented, and now that he's kind of in that slot role too, he's complementing his already awesome downfield efficiency with high percentage targets underneath. So good things are going to come from Tyler Lockett moving forward. But DK Metcalf is the guy that I'm going to keep going back to the well on. And, you know, maybe I'm just too biased against these speedy wide receivers that can have the contested catch ability, but this guy gets nothing but fantasy-friendly targets. I mean, ESPN's Mike Clay had a good stat. Metcalf and Kenny Golladay lead the league in end zone targets at 7. He's getting nothing but deep balls. Eventually, the boom is going to come.
I like Tyler Lockett specifically just because we just saw what Chris Godwin did in the slot against the Rams, and now it's Tyler Lockett's turn on lesser volume, of course. But as you mentioned, DK Metcalf, leader in end zone targets. Quietly, though, Will Dissly leads his position in end zone targets. So it is a blow-up spot that goes against recency bias since the Cardinals, and we'll talk about this as the show progresses, but the Cardinals didn't force Russ Wilson to do anything. Like, that's the only reason the passing offense for the Seahawks looked bad. It's because they weren't needed at all. So now you have a spot where you have two guys we know getting constant end zone targets, league highs worth, as we discussed. I just think it's such a great spot for this passing offense in particular to bounce back.
The interesting part is what's going to happen in the run game, because Chris Carson last week played amazing. I believe Sports Info Solutions shouted him out. Most broken tackles.
And it looked like it when you watched it, too.
Yeah, for sure. Like, wasn't an egregious call by them at all. And so he's playing so well. And when he can hold on to the football, as we saw last week, he's a great running back. But Rashad Penny, we are expecting him to be back this week. He's practicing in full these last 2 days. And he's going to add another body to it. And look, I think they were hesitant to give Procise between the tackle carries based on his past. And it's just not really his strength. With that said, this is still Chris Carson's job to lose, I think. Will he reach that 76% snap rate every week? Maybe not, but I'd still be surprised if he falls under 60.
And if we are targeting this Seahawks offense, we are hoping for shootout purposes that the Rams answer as well. And what we do know is Jared Goff has finished top 10 quarterback in 2 appearances at home this year, and then the QB 19 and QB 29, I believe, and 2 appearances on the road. And now we have, in week 5, road Goff again. Do you have any lean on what to expect from Goff in this one?
I mean, he's not going to throw 68 passes again, third most in NFL history last week. So we got to keep in mind some of those numbers were inflated. I mean, Gerald Everett set a career high in targets. Gurley and Higbee were like second highest career marks and targets. But the one good thing I did see last week from that performance was it seemed like they started to get their downfield passing game. If not back on track yet, they're at least realizing that they got to get defenders off the line of scrimmage. Their offensive line isn't as good as last year. He's getting pressure more often. There's, their adjusted line yard rate is down. Not as much room at the line of scrimmage. So what they do, Cooks, 45-yard touchdown, just missed it, a little bit overthrown. And Robert Woods, 8 in the intermediate areas of the field. So as long as Cooper Kupp keeps playing like one of the best wide receivers in the league, slot, outside, whatever, the guy is balling out, period. The offense, I think, is going to get back on track sooner rather than later. And it could be against the Seahawks defense that, let's go through it, they faced Andy Dalton. Then they knocked out Roethlisberger and Breeze in back-to-back weeks, so they got unprepared backups. And they got Kyler Murray last week, who has obviously not quite lived up to expectations at this point. So this could be the week that they really get exposed.
Do you have a lean on any of these wide receivers? Because in showdown slates in particular this year, wide receivers have taken down, I believe, over 60%. They've been in the winning lineup in the captain spot. So I look at both Seattle's wide receivers and the Rams guys. The issue is the Rams have more potential threats. There's 3 guys getting concentrated volume. Obviously, Cooper Kupp's the one we're looking at, but is there any that differ from that?
So Woods has had the most success against the Seahawks in these past 4 matchups, but with that said, none of the guys have really gone off that much. I think it remains almost a, just musical chairs, which one's going to go off, because they played 12 games together at this point, and Woods actually has, and I mean 12 games as in, Kupp obviously was hurt last year, so 12 games with these 3 wide receivers. Cooks has 90 targets, which when he's getting the deep balls isn't bad. Woods is at 103, Kupp's at 101. So even though Kupp has kind of emerged as the number 1 through 4 weeks this season, I still think they want to keep all 3 of those guys involved. So in a showdown slate, if we're just kind of looking for a big pop-up performance, give me Brandon Cooks.
It's only Wednesday, so I haven't teetered entirely with my showdown lineups just yet. But a guy I was looking at, I will say here, is Brandon Cooks, just because he's going against Trey Flowers, and Flowers is the one planted on his side, has allowed 19 of 27 targets to be caught for 248 yards and 2 scores.
Not great.
So, not great. Cooper Kupp is the easy decision to make in that captain spot. Almost like he's too good of spot to be in, and he should be in your captain spot. But be contrarian in deeper tournaments, I think Cooks is one to look at.
And don't be afraid to play these defenses too, particularly the Rams, who even last week when they gave up over 50 points to that Buccaneers team, they still got a pick 6 from Peters where, thank God he's okay. He got drilled on that. But this is a playmaking defense. We've seen Corey Littleton all this season make a bunch of plays. Their cornerbacks can make plays. So even though you have 2 high-scoring teams potentially, that's not always the worst thing for defenses, because they can still go out there and score themselves, and we've seen that from the Rams a lot over the last season and a half.
It's an interesting Thursday game, but it's also the whole reason we're here too is because it's an interesting Sunday slate.
Oh, yeah.
The Sunday slate now takes away Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs offense from us. The Sunday main slate has no total over 50. And the Sunday main slate has so many injuries. So we're doing this early Wednesday, and there's still a lot to sort out. But I think you and I have quote-unquote building blocks that we're already on top of.
Oh, yeah. We are on the brand of building blocks this week. I'm ready to go with it. And, yeah, like you said, we need to pay attention to news for later in the week.
It's a big news week.
I think there's still some pricing discrepancies we can point to right now that should help get some lineups started.
Okay, well, tell us these price discrepancies. Let's start with quarterbacks here, actually.
Yeah, so as you can see in our lovely player projections available in the DFS toolkit from Rotoworld, quarterbacks, we're seeing some value here at the top. Matt Ryan and my favorite cash play of the week at quarterback, Carson Wentz, emerging as, some of the top value plays. And my thing with Carson Wentz is this. Look, he hasn't had great volume. Last week against the Packers, he only threw like 27 passes, but I think that was more of a factor of, 1, him dealing with so many banged up receivers, and 2, the Packers simply having a better secondary. Like, they were able to run the ball. Why would you stop that? This week, we could be getting Deshaun Jackson back. I haven't seen an update, but, it has been. Now, I believe they expect him to miss these last 2 games, and he could be back. We saw a healthier Dallas Goedert last week. His snap rate got back to normal. And Alshon, who didn't really look 100% last week, the extra time off should do him some good as well. So, Jets pass defense, not a team I'm shying away from. And
no, not at all.
You mentioned there's not really any high totals this week, but I'm seeing the Eagles sitting there with a 28.25, I think, implied team total, and they're going to put some points up.
So it's not a high total week, as you just said, but I think that's great for tournaments because everyone will be focused on one game, and we're about to talk about this game, but that allows us to target other situations that could be better despite the fact everyone's concentration is honed in on one particular spot. But for cash game purposes, remember, for head-to-heads, we're not worried about ownership per se. We're just playing the most optimal lineup. Not the best players, the most optimal players.
Yep.
And in this situation, everyone will look to Deshaun Watson because this game between the Texans and Falcons is going to be a big one this week. But if you're looking at salary savings, I genuinely think Matt Ryan is in as good position as well. Whether it's for tournaments or cash play, but you can save nearly 1K by going down to Ryan in this spot. The Texas defense has been sturdy, but I consider Ryan actually matchup proof. He did not. That Falcons offense against the Titans looked lifeless. And yes, part of his 390 yards, I believe it was, can be attributed to the fact that he was in garbage time from the second half, the entire second half. But being matchup proof, the first 4 games, he's thrown at least 300 yards in every spot. And now we have him going up against a set of shoddy corners who we're not concerned with at all.
Right.
The Falcons need to improve their offensive line play, but recall last week, Ryan was under so duress. I believe it was double-digit quarterback hits. Under that much duress because they lost two starting offensive linemen. Alex Mack mid-game went out, and then Jamon Brown mid-game went out. And they were just left with absolutely nothing. They had no choice in a negative game script to drop back. But how do you do that without two offensive linemen?
Yeah, I mean, again, those are two injuries we need to keep an eye on. But like you said, this matchup, if it's going to happen with two shoddy offensive linemen potentially out, I think he can get it done. Look, my favorite GPP quarterback of the week, though, is a guy who hasn't been great since the start of the season, but I still think he's going to finish this year as one of the top overall quarterbacks, and that's Lamar Jackson. Because, look, we got to realize there's going to be some ups and downs with this team. And as someone who was completely burned by Hollywood Brown last week, and I could not have been more public about that, but yeah, very burned there. But look, with that said, Lamar Jackson this year in 4 starts, he was the QB1, the QB2, the QB10, and the QB3. He has week winning upside every single week. We still haven't seen a game where both the rushing and passing comes together at the same time, and we just see a complete blow-up performance, and I think it could happen this week. I'm not sold on the Steelers' defense being world beaters after they shut down Andy Dalton and company in a primetime game at home.
I'm glad you mentioned Andy Dalton because, and by the way, everything Ian's using on his computer screen, remember, we are actually using Rotoworld's premium DFS tools. So rotoworld.com/DFS will take you to not only projected starting lineups to help you build lineups, but also our DFS projections and lineup optimizer, which we'll get to at the end of the show and throughout as you're seeing that screen in front of you. But you mentioned Andy Dalton, and there has been a lot of Q&As, not only in the Twitch, which people are hitting up right now, but a lot of the past couple of days. And that's because Andy Dalton performed so poorly against that Steelers defense you discussed. But recall, Andy Dalton, primetime spots, historically not good. Andy Dalton in a divisional against a common opponent, a divisional opponent, again, not good. And now his offensive line teeters against the Steelers who have a high pressure rate. It all was so bad for Andy Dalton. And thus, my favorite thing about DFS actually is not just optimal plays, it's playing against humans.
Let's roll it back.
It's playing against humans, and we are playing against recency bias in what is the best spot the Bengals have had all year, arguably. Cardinals defense, 31 points in week 1 to Matt Stafford, 33 points to Lamar Jackson in week 2, 25 points to Kyle Allen in week 3, and then last week only 14 points to Russ. But as we talked about at the beginning of the show, there was no need for the Seahawks to throw whatsoever. It was all Chris Carson, and they rode that with promise till the end. But now we get Andy Dalton in a game where they're going to have to throw. The Bengals defense is bad. I just don't see how either side stops each other, and Andy Dalton is such a QB10 coming into week 3. Remember that. Coming into week 4, I should say, QB10 in fantasy, and then obviously plummeted. It's just the spot to go right back to Andy Dalton and forget about all recency bias.
I like the call, man. All right, let's move on to some running back talk. And look, I'm going to have Ezekiel Elliott in as many lineups as possible this week, specifically cash. And I understand he has not looked that great this year. He doesn't look like he has the same burst he had in year 1, for example. I think his long run this year is 16. But this is just a 4-game sample size. This is still the same guy who led the league in runs of 15-plus yards last season, and he's still the focal point of this Cowboys offense. And now finally, he's not on the road against an underrated Saints defense with a pretty solid front. He's facing a Packers defense that we just saw get run all the way over against the Eagles last week. I mean, they made Jordan Howard look like a freaking all-star. And I feel like we're going to be looking at Zeke here in a prime spot at home. No Tyron Smith. Yes, that's a concern. You know, we saw the offense plummet over the, in 2017 without Zeke and Tyron Smith. Not great, but he's going to get 20-plus touches, and that's what we need. We need the opportunity, and it's, like I said, pretty good spot. And, you're looking at our toolkit. When the guy's projected, he's one of, 6 running backs projected for over 19 points per reception. Yeah, I'm going to take my chances on him.
I think that's a good play. I almost picked him, but I didn't want to overlap our picks.
Can't do it.
This week, there are numerous cheap receiver options, and we'll get to them here in a minute. But that allows us to spend up at running back. So I'm also going up in price and going to Alvin Kamara. The Bucs defense has quietly been good, allowed a high amount of yardage, but has done their job in shootouts and been one of the top 10 defenses in fantasy this year. Shaq Barrett, as we know, Defensive Player of the Year candidate, if not even a candidate, just like the outright leader right now.
So good.
Having said that, without Drew Brees, this offense, the Saints offense, has run strictly through Kamara. And now we are back in an up-tempo spot as it was last week. It didn't go that way because Cowboys linebackers are so quick and fast laterally. But Kamara's again back in a spot in the dome, an up-tempo pace, and without Drew Brees, like I talked about the past 2 weeks, 82.5% snap rate, 33 carries to Latavius Murray's 6, and 13 targets to Latavius Murray's 1. They'd have no choice due to their offense under Teddy Bridgewater being horizontal to go back and forth, to go back to Alvin Kamara. There's a reason he's playing a career-high snap rate now, and it's because they have to go to him. They have no more explosiveness like beyond him. Even Michael Thomas is a floor play now, and it's hard for him to reach his ceiling from Bridgewater. So I just think Kamara, basically until Breeze gets back, you just lock it in and forget about it.
Definitely. Alvin Kamara with an actual RB1 workload for once. Unfair. All right, my RB GPP play of the week is, I want to throw up so bad, Carlos Hyde. And I have not been on the Carlos Hyde train all season pretty much.
All right, give it to me. Reason to me.
Okay, he's facing the Falcons. It's the one cheat code defense we have determined over the year to play running backs against. And yeah, I know it's usually because of the short receptions, but the Texans somehow gave Carlos Hyde 5 targets last week. Right. The ridiculous trick play that we all saw where DeAndre Hopkins tried to throw the ball back across the field was schemed for Carlos Hyde somehow. I mean, I was more mad at the fact that it wasn't Duke Johnson versus like the just horrendous play call it was in the first place. So not great there. But look, Carlos Hyde, 4,300 as the lead running back against, again, a Falcons defense that has been eviscerated by receiving backs and just on the ground in general. I mean, this is not a defense we need to fear by any stretch of the imagination. We're in a potential shootout spot. I feel like everyone's going to be on these wide receivers in this game. And look, I do think the passing offenses have, more room to thrive on both sides of the ball, but for 4,300 in a GPP format, sign me up for Hyde here. And look, he does have a good touch floor. This year he's gotten 11, 20, 10, and 16 touches per game. So no, it's not the 20-plus touch bell cow work, but again, with the price and the matchup, the price is right.
And it's just Bill
O'Brien. That was good.
It's Bill O'Brien, though, right? Like
it is Bill O'Brien.
It's so we keep wanting to go back to Duke Johnson, but clearly Bill O'Brien doesn't want to go back to Duke Johnson. He just wants to continue using Hyde. On that note, my play, it's not as disgusting, but it takes some gall, and it takes an injury happening, or an injury fading back, because as we know, Sam Darnold has been dealing with mono. He got cleared for practice as of Wednesday. Not contact just yet, but everything's trending positively. And if he's under center against the Eagles, Le'Veon Bell usage is then enhanced even more. The Eagles are top 3 in the league against running backs, but we don't play Le'Veon Bell for his rushing yards. We play Le'Veon Bell for his all-around usage. He's averaged just nearly 19 carries per game. He's averaged just under 8 targets per game. And the Eagles, in being so good against the rush, have actually allowed the 6th most receptions to running backs. If Donald is back in there, it heightens everyone. Robbie Anderson should be a tournament play. Jamison Crowder is a cash play given his shallower routes and target share from week 1 whenever Darnold was under center. And Le'Veon Bell then, the pass game is open with Darnold, so it should open up a few more holes. But again, it's a matter of him getting 10 targets or so from Darnold. And so I think it's an off-the-radar, high-floor play.
Top 3 running back value plays this week on DraftKings per our DFS Toolkit Optimizer ARC, and this is in terms of dollars for fantasy points. We're looking for value here. Number 1, Christian McCaffrey. Number 2, Le'Veon Bell. Number 3, Leonard Fournette. I mean, if they got the high enough implied fantasy point total, they can get there. You don't have to salary sign.
We actually have a Twitch question that came in, so let's just discuss this really quick. Mark Ingram or Wayne Gallman this week? Gallman, of course, against the Vikings, a much tougher spot than the Redskins. And then as we talked about, we are both on the Ravens against the Steelers in a bounce-back spot.
Yeah, I go Mark Ingram here. I mean, look, he has not had ideal game script each of the last 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. We've still seen him get in the low teens in touches, and he's running the ball great. I mean, it looked like earlier in the year we could see kind of a timeshare with him and Gus Edwards and Justice Hill, but that hasn't been the case. He's been the complete bell cow there.
I actually lean Gallman in this spot. It's tougher, like I said, than last week's matchup against the Redskins. And I wish he had played more than around 64% of the snaps, but he still caught passes. He was still their every down back. And if the Vikings can keep this competitive, if they can actually use Kirk Cousins and Adam Thielen, which is shaping up to be a squeaky wheel spot because everyone's now talking about how Adam Thielen was missed on those open touchdowns, then Wayne Gallman is still in a good position to catch passes. So Wayne Gallman's a cash play. I haven't teetered. It's still early in the week, so he could be on that radar, but I think he's fine for tournaments as well. Mark Ingram, of course, would have lower ownership.
All right, moving on to some wide receivers now. Happy Will Fuller week, because I feel so confident in Will Fuller.
I mentioned it as a tournament play, and he ended up being a cash play for a lot of people, which was fine, a great spot. But we saw what happened. The floor is what we were worried about.
We did see what happened. We saw he was inches away from having a 75-yard. I mean, man,
fingertips.
I think everyone saw the Deshaun Watson kind of interview where he answered the reporter's question and really gave the in-depth answer. And one of the things he mentioned was, the 2 shot plays they did fire up, he missed Will Fuller by inches, and he missed DeAndre Hopkins by inches on another one. Watson's going to make those passes more times than not. And honestly, this is just what we've seen all season from Will Fuller. He's one of only 7 receivers that has more than 200 additional air yards versus receiving yards. So he's getting thrown the ball like we want him to. He's just not quite getting it. I think that his air yards can even go up this week because Kenny Stills has a hamstring injury. It's looking doubtful that he's going to play, honestly. We'll see what his practice participation looks like, but I have a hard time believing he'll be out there. And if he is, probably not his usual snap rate, which means we get Kiki Kute back. And yes, Kute had a bunch of targets last season, but those games kind of intertwined with when Fuller was out. And I'm not even really worried about that because Kute is an underneath receiver. Stills is a downfield receiver. We can, I think, reasonably imply that Fuller is going to reasonably infer Fuller could get an extra downfield target or 2 this game just by the fact that Stills not being there. In this matchup, I am not afraid of the Falcons cornerbacks at all.
Yeah.
Trufant, if anything, he's going to be on Hopkins more, but they don't really like to move their cornerbacks regardless of that. And yeah, I mean, Fuller's sitting here at 4,500. He finally kind of got the price drop we were waiting for. Positive aggression is going to come for this guy.
I agree. And a Twitch question came in, Auden Tate's outlook. And I'll tell you Auden Tate's outlook because Auden Tate is an easy cash play this week. It just all aligns following John Ross's shoulder injury, most likely out the next 2 to 4 weeks. Auden Tate was an afterthought in the first 2 games. They gave the reins to undrafted free agent Damian Willis. But the past 2 weeks, Auden Tate has started. And in those starts, he's been wide receiver 31 the past 2 weeks. In those starts, he's he's matched, basically mirrored Tyler Boyd in targets and catches. And he has, I believe, 38, 37 more receiving yards than Tyler Boyd. He's a number 2 receiver in an offense that, again, if we're playing Andy Dalton, we're playing Auden Tate. And more importantly, he's $3K less than Tyler Boyd on DraftKings in particular. So Auden Tate is one that I am going to, without fear, without hesitation, in cash games this week.
Rotoworld's #1 value receiver of the week.
And if you look, again, on rotoworld.com/DFS, the #1 value in our toolkit.
All right, my GPP wide receiver of the week is Robbie Anderson. We're talking
a
lot of these Jets, Eagles, and Falcons, Texans games, but this is contingent on Sam Darnold being back this week. But even then, I can see him getting loose a little bit because this Eagles secondary, look, we're not good defending #1 wide receivers. Last season they were healthy. Last season they were injured. This season they weren't good defending when they were healthy, and now they're all injured. This is ridiculous. Jalen Mills is on the PUP with a foot injury. Avonte Maddox has a neck injury. He's week to week. Sidney Jones and Ron Darby both should be considered very questionable and have hamstring injuries. Like, it reminds me of the Hollywood spot last week, which obviously didn't work out. So take that for what it's worth. But we have a situation where even if the Eagles are going to be healthier at cornerback than we think, they're going to be guys on gimpy hamstrings, which when you're facing a guy like Robbie Anderson, good luck there. So yes, in week 1, Jamison Crowder was absolutely peppered with targets, but lost in that a little bit was that Anderson wasn't too far away from having a pretty good game himself. Yes, only three catches, 23 yards, but 7 targets. He was 15th in air yards that week on just 7 targets. And towards the end of the game, he was, again, kind of like Will Fuller last week, just a few inches away from getting a deep ball. So, I mean, we're going to see Robbie's price, his price shoot up eventually once he gets a couple of these big bombs from Darnold. So I like to be in there before that happens.
I am going to the Texans game as well, but as I've talked about earlier, love incorporating game theory into everything I do because, again, we're playing people. We're not just playing the system. And so the people will look down to Will Fuller and Kiki Qt, and I think that's the right call. But in tournaments, they're not going to want to spend up for the highest priced receiver in DeAndre Hopkins.
Yep.
And I just said his name, which should make you go back to him because we're not worried about DeAndre Hopkins. Yes, DeAndre Hopkins, 7.5 targets the past 3 weeks, has not caught for more than 70 yards in that span. But again, it's DeAndre Hopkins. Desmond Trufant, as you said, will likely be on him, and Desmond Trufant was just burned, just bullied by Corey Davis and in particular A.J. Brown last week. DeAndre Hopkins now won't have Kenny Stills playing alongside him. And this is why I'm big on the Texans offense this week. Kenny Stills' average depth of target this year was close to 14 yards downfield, whereas Kiki Qt's last year was 8.5 yards from the line of scrimmage. That allows for more deep passing to Will Fuller and DeAndre Hopkins. It's almost like Stills was running the same routes and thus taking away from the outsides. We are back to our prominent 2 on the outside. And just in the fact that everyone will be so concerned to spend more money on DeAndre Hopkins, that's why I want to spend more money, because this will probably be the lowest ownership you'll have on DeAndre Hopkins all year long.
Week 3, the struggling number 1 wide receiver that blew up was Mike Evans. Week 4 is Devontae Adams. It's DeAndre Hopkins in Week 5.
I love to hear that. And we do have a question about wide receivers here. So let's assume for a minute, because we have talked about the Eagles offense, and you said Carson Wentz is your cash play, your favorite cash play. So let's assume that Deshaun Jackson's healthy. Just for a second. He may not be. But if Deshaun Jackson's healthy, would you prefer Marquise Brown or Deshaun Jackson? It's a tough one.
I'm going to stick with Hollywood because even if D-Jax is healthy, we've seen Mac Hollins out there enough that I could see limited snaps in there. I do think Hollywood has a higher target floor on a week-to-week basis compared to D-Jax, even though I know his week 1 was something else. But it is tough, man. And I would note, though, we really shouldn't be afraid of either of the Steelers or Eagles Jets, group of cornerbacks.
Mm-hmm.
Steelers, they got Joe Hayden out there, but still, I mean, he's a 4.6 guy himself, like not your quickest group of cornerbacks. God forbid we put Hollywood Brown in the slot a little bit. He gets matched up against a linebacker or something. And then Jets as well. I mean, their highest paid cornerback, Tremaine Johnson, has been benched this season. So, maybe the answer is put both of them in a lineup.
Yeah, I think the answer is to put both in your lineup. But I do prefer Marquise Brown in that spot, only because he should have gone nuts against the Browns' backup corners last week, and he just didn't. Yeah. And that should be no reason to fret him this week. My tight end building block, though, is a move along here just because we are on the Eagles offense. So I just want to keep it on the Eagles offense. And Deshaun Jackson, so it depends on Jackson, right? Like if the Jackson's out, we know Zach Ertz will stay higher in target share. The past 2 weeks alone, a 24% target share. And I actually like the fact that within that span, within the whole season, like he has yet to catch a touchdown. That to me spells regression. And I would imagine it comes as early as this week against a shoddy Jets secondary that, as you've talked about, Carson Wentz should be able just to attack.
I think it's Ertz sleeve right arm, Goddard's left arm, because they're
you think it's that?
Hardest duo in the league to tell.
It takes them rolling over.
Gosh, but yeah, okay. I'm sticking at the top of this. This is the week to pay up for tight end because we just have 2 guys in Zach Ertz and Evan Ingram, even Darren Waller. I mean, let's look at our toolkit projections. Like these are the only guys projected over 12 points, and that's reflecting. These guys are number 1 receivers in their offenses, even though they're tight ends. So I've loved everything I've seen from Evan Ingram. I know he's facing the Vikings, but Vikings have still been a defense. One of the few that it's a different defense when they're playing inside the dome in Minnesota versus when they're on the road. So wouldn't freak out too much over the matchup. And even then, like Harrison Smith is incredible. I will never say a bad word about that man, but he's more of a middle of the field free safety. Like Ingram works enough underneath that he can rack up a big performance even if it's not coming against Smith directly. We saw it happen with Austin Hooper. We saw it happen with Darren Waller. Like just because the team has good safeties, you can already make an argument that we can't we don't know enough about defenses to probably properly include. Like that's the whole defenses don't matter thing. Defenses obviously matter. It's do we know enough about defenses to make them matter in our evaluations? And I think the tight end position in particular is one you don't have to worry about the matchups as much because it's so much harder than even wide receiver cornerbacks who aren't on each other for every snap of the game regardless, and that's especially true of the tight end position. So
if we're spending up at tight end in cash games this week, does that mean we're spending down in tournaments?
Oh, it does. And I'll go first here. Noah Fant is my spend down tight end option. He is coming at 2,800 on DraftKings this week, popping a little bit as one of our better value plays on the toolkit. And he started to show some flashes last week, and he really has all season. He hasn't been, he got mugged by Jair Alexander, took the ball from him a couple weeks ago. He's had a little bit of the dropsies with him, but took a screen in the house, and we've seen this from the Broncos offense dating back to the preseason even. Like, they want to get this guy the ball. They draft him in the first round. He's an athletic, receiving-minded tight end. They want to get him going. Now he's got this matchup against the Chargers, who they're starting to get healthier at cornerback. Michael Davis was healthy last week, first time. Casey Hayward's a baller, but their safeties, they're still on their third-string guy with Derwin and their other backup out. So saw Houston tight ends who are much less talented than Noah Fant. Again, the end zone 3 times against them. Noah Fant, 73% snaps last week. Only 4 targets per game, but again, when you don't have to spend $3K on him, let's take the dart throw.
And quietly, what I love about Fant is that he has run the 8th most routes among all tight ends.
Love it.
His on-field usage, he's on the field literally every single down. Yeah. There's no reason to be scared of that. For my tight end, though, I'm also going cheap, and I am going back to the well that we continue to go to. The Cardinals' defense, Week 1, 100 yards and a touchdown to T.J. Hawkinson. Week 2, 100 yards and a touchdown to Mark Andrews. Week 3, 75 yards and 2 touchdowns to Greg Olsen. Week 4, 57 yards and a touchdown to Will Dissly. And whose turn is it? Tyler Eifert was on deck, and now he's stepping up to the plate, and he's just about to smash it out. 3 Bengals in a single DFS show is probably entirely too many, to be honest. But the fact that everyone's fearing them, and you shouldn't this week, is why I just love, even as much as a double stack with Andy Dalton between Tate and Tyler Eifert.
Yeah, and we saw on Monday night Eifert was inches away from getting that 1 touchdown. So he's not a guy that seems like he is due. And
your tight end. Oh wait, you already did your tight end.
Yeah, we're good.
I'm going off the rails there. Okay, well, let's just get to a quick question then before we move on to defenses here, cool. Because Ansat Susha definitely did not pronounce that correctly. Wants to know, and this is an all-around question, by the way. So we're talking about a flex option: Ronald Jones, Carlos Hyde, Philip Lindsay, or Mohamed Sanu. So Mohamed Sanu is interesting because we scoff at that, but historically in games that the Falcons have shot high, and we believe this will be a shootout, Mohamed Sanu always gets his share. I don't have the exact numbers on me, but I know historically Sanu has always been around a wide receiver 35 or so, which is good for a cheap DFS option.
I'm still going with Philip Lindsay.
Okay.
I think people got so turned off by him splitting snaps with Royce Freeman to start the season, but again, like, Devontae Booker's out of the picture. It's a 2-back committee. It's a low-scoring offense, so we're going to see weeks like last week where they, get in bad game script and don't really get going. But this isn't a situation where it's like Lindsey is just the pass down back and Freeman's the early down guy. Like, when they're in the game, they are just trusted to be a 3-down running back. Both guys are good enough to do that. And we've seen about a touch floor of usually in most weeks around 15 touches for Lindsey. So give him the opportunity, and when he's facing a Chargers defense that doesn't have the best group of linebackers in the world, I'm fine taking that chance.
Okay, and with that, we only have one more position then before we do our favorite segment where we yell at each other and build a lineup together for the people, with the people. So lay us your favorite cash game defense play.
So I'm going to go back to the well and keep going cheap here, and that's going to be with the Carolina Panthers. At home, only 2,600. I'm as big a fan of Minshew Mania as the next guy. With that said, this is probably going to be the best defense they've faced to this point. Broncos, a little bit of frauds this season so far. And the Panthers, don't look now, but they have one of the best secondaries in football so far. James Bradbury shut down DeAndre Hopkins and Mike Evans so far this season. He deserves credit, and he deserves to be named among some of the league's best cornerbacks at this point. They haven't been exceptional defending the run, which when you're facing Leonard Fournette, yes, that can be a problem. But I don't know, man. They're home against an offense that I don't think deserves the benefit of the doubt yet. And for only 2,600, feel free to, stack them up there with Christian McCaffrey and get all those points.
For me, I'm going to, and we've discussed this game, so this is going to be an odd suggestion. But one, I don't really think you should spend over 2,900, $3K on defenses this week. There are a lot open up at the bottom, despite the fact that New England continues to just pile on and break the system. But let's say this. If you had blindly played defenses against the Texans this year, you not only got 2 top 10 performances, but 3 top 15, as that offensive line continues to rank with a league low 40% pressure rate allowed. They're just bad. and it doesn't mesh well since Deshaun Watson, as explosive as he is, also holds on to the ball because that's the kind of playmaker he is. It's not detrimental for actual football, but it's great for fantasy football for us. So I just lean the Falcons at a cheap, next to minimum cost across sites, and you can rack up sacks. If you're playing Deshaun Watson, you're not playing the Falcons defense, but you can play the Falcons defense and still have one of Hopkins, Fuller, or QT in your lineup.
Yep.
Is there one particular you like for defense, or are we still sticking around the same thing?
Yeah, I'm kind of with that. I do think the cheapest I'd be willing to go this week on defense is I think the Cincinnati Bengals at 25. They're also 2,500 along with the Falcons. And, I'm more inclined just to kind of overload with the Panthers exposure versus mess around with them because I'm not so confident the Bengals are truly a good defense. But look, Kyler Murray and company, they keep turning over the ball, and yeah, they run a lot of plays, but more and more it's looking like those high amount of plays are becoming more opportunities for the defenses they're facing to get sacks and turnovers than Kyler Murray and company to rack up yards. So, look, I want Kyler and them to figure it out as much as the next DFS analyst. I did nothing but tout him this entire summer, but I don't know if it's in this spot.
Well, I think that's why David Johnson is also a tournament play, because the past 2 games, Kyler Murray's averaged under 5 yards an attempt because the Cardinals are taking what they're given.
Yep.
And the past 2 defenses have played over the top and forced everything underneath. So it's not explosive strategy, but it's optimal strategy. And that's why, as I said, I think David Johnson continues getting dumped off this week. It's just a matter of them answering the Bengals offense. With that being said, though, we can go ahead and let's build a lineup. And again, Rotoworld.com/DFS, our optimizer. We're actually going to use it here. Friendly guy asks, what game are we stacking? But I have a feeling we're about to find out what game we're stacking.
That is correct. I'm going to draw first blood here at the quarterback position. Give me Mr. Matt Ryan, as we talked about previously. Oops. Oh, man. I keep messing this up. We'll get back there. But look, again, Atlanta-Houston game, that's going to be where we're stacking this whole time, man.
That's fair. And as I said, there's no total that goes over 50. So I do think there's reason to stack other games, but we can also mix those games in around our game stack. So let's just say the game stack we want this week is Texans-Falcons. And as we get Matt Ryan in, I actually lean to Calvin Ridley, who I think has as good of a matchup as Julio Jones. And the first 2 games he played, recall, it was 64 yards and a touchdown, and then 10 targets for 8 catches, 100 yards and a touchdown. Everyone will be looking to go back to Julio Jones as the obvious play. I think Calvin Ridley goes overlooked. So I like stacking Matt Ryan with Calvin Ridley here.
It does seem like Ridley's due for a blowout
touchdown
spot.
regression,
and
absolutely.
All the nice things we're saying about DeAndre Hopkins and Will Fuller, you can look at the other side as well.
And we're going to look at the other side, don't worry.
Having 35-year-old, 36-year-old Jonathan Joseph, tracking these guys, I don't know how well it's going to work out. And I will be looking at the other side of the ball. Maybe we'll just pick every single player from this game. Why not, right? Mm-hmm. I'm going Will Fuller, talking about him earlier. But again, now we have Ridley and Fuller, 2 guys both under 5K. Like you said at the start of the show, there's so many cheap receiving options this week. Like, give me these guys that we can hopefully get one big play from, and they'll meet their price tag pretty much with that, and then we'll spend up a running back later.
I'm admittedly a single cash game guy unless I feel the absolute necessity to hedge because I can't decide between 2 similarly priced players. And then I'm also a single entry tournament guy plus a few others sprinkled in. This week it gets the sense of having to use quite a few lineups because it's not about the player pool being larger, it's about getting the right combination of that concentrated player pool. And all of these options in the Falcons-Texans games, in the Eagles-Jets game, in Cincinnati-Arizona game, even a guy like Andy Isabella, I'm sneakily looking at. I don't even want to say it on camera because I kind of want to keep it to myself. But I'm looking at options like that because they could prosper. And that assumes Christian Kirk and Damiere Byrd are out.
Right.
So far, we have Matt Ryan, Calvin Ridley, Will Fuller, and then I am going to go ahead and get this double stack down and go to Austin Hooper. I don't know why people are still so concerned about Austin Hooper when he's done nothing but perform. I mean, his first 9 games, 9, 6, 7, and 11 targets. He's a top 5 tight end on the year, and it doesn't seem like it's ever going to stop. Like, it's not just shootout purposes. Matt Ryan looks to him as a concentrated part of the offense. And he's a cash game play essentially, but people are scared to go to him in tournaments. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, the thing I love about Hooper is he's just almost guaranteed for 5 catches a game. Like he will never just tank your lineup, it seems like. And we've seen Matt Ryan go to him 8 to 10 times a game. Mercy.
You got it, don't worry.
When that happens, he's just blowing up. So with you there. All right, I think we can start to spend up a running back now. And yeah, I like everything you said about Le'Veon Bell. And to see him under 7K on DraftKings is really just kind of alarming, because the only guy in this league that has a workload close to Christian McCaffrey is Le'Veon. And I mean, he's had a tough stretch of games, and he has done nothing but stay positive, keep grinding through it. I hated this narrative that was going around the offseason that Le'Veon Bell was this bad guy and that he didn't care about his teammates and stuff. Look, he had to do what he needed to do to get his money. We've never seen this guy on the field give anything less to it than his all. And for a running back to be playing 100% of your team snaps, to be your team's #1 receiver on a lot of weeks, to have the entire defense's attention on you, and still, I think he's #1. He was #1 in the league in broken tackles before the bye, and he was racking up yards even in this awful situation. So hopefully the defense improves a little bit. He gets some of those cozy matchups against linebackers like you were talking about, and we get a big week.
How much salary are we looking at that we have left?
We got enough that you can pick whoever you want in our last spot.
Enough that so legal obligations. We can't fill 2 spots. But I guess then let's go to, this one's tough, man. There's so many good spots.
You got to trust your instincts, man.
Okay, you already picked Robbie Anderson. So
I did not pick Robbie Anderson.
Oh, you didn't?
No.
Okay, well then, no, you picked Le'Veon Bell, though.
Oh,
so
true.
I'm saying,
we don't want
okay,
that.
well in that case, though, this is good because we're thinking aloud. That would assume that touchdown equity goes straight to the running back and not to the passing game.
Correct.
So then let's avoid the passing game as a fade, and thus, let's just make it easy and get Alvin Kamara in there.
Yeah.
Because there are enough cheap receiver options for that 3rd spot between QT, between possibly Andy Isabella, and Auden Tate. The list goes on that we can afford another running back. So let's just eat the chalk. We'll go Alvin Kamara, who could, with Christian McCaffrey's tough matchup against the Jaguars, you're not concerned about it, but also it allows a spot for Kamara to potentially finish as the #1 running back this week overall. So we can just go ahead and lock it up there.
If you're going to eat the chalk, do it with one of these running backs that's getting you 20-plus touches per game, and that's been Kamara and it's been Bell.
It's like last week, where when someone's in such a good position that you shouldn't overthink it, you don't worry about ownership. You can always go unique elsewhere. Wayne Gallman should not have been 73% owned last week. Wayne Gallman should have been 100% owned. And it was just a case of 27% of the world overthinking it. So I like going over the chalk, especially when it's one particular player and not a lot of players, as opposed to just fading it. So why don't you read off what we have for the people before we get out of here.
All right, our Rotoworld locks of the week, if you will.
I don't know about that, but it's a tournament lineup. Calm down.
All right, if you want to win all the money this week, Matt Ryan, quarterback, Calvin Ridley, wide receiver, Will Fuller, wide receiver, Austin Hooper, tight end, and at running back, we were going with Le'Veon Bell and Alvin Kamara. We'll see what happens.
Rotoworld.com/DFS if you want to get involved with the toolkit and lineup making. Rotoworld Football Podcast on iTunes. And we will, of course, be back Sunday morning, noon Eastern, on NBC Sports app, Twitch, and YouTube, answering your start and sit questions. And it's a big news-laden week, so the people need to be here.